Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Politigood. I'm Rachel Parker.
And I'm Tim Fullerton.
I just want to say a couple things before we dig into what we're going to talk about today. Tim, are you still going to talk to us commoners? Now that you're like a rock star podcaster.
Oh, God.
I'm so glad you're here with us. I feel like what just happened. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure a lot of you do. Tim has a sister wife podcast. And it's called, Tim, what is it called?
It's called the Find Out Podcast.
And I would like for you to tell folks a little bit about it. Just talk a little bit about it. And then after that, I would like for you to tell everybody what happened to the first episode of the Find Out Podcast.
Yeah. Well, where even to start with this? So I was part of the White Dudes for Harris group of guys that started that last August. And obviously we didn't succeed in November like we wanted to, but I think we really tapped into something, that there is a lane for content related to liberal/progressive men. And so, obviously we were in a bit of darkness after the election. And I'm in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of TikTok guys that we all met from that, because one of my jobs was to go find liberal TikTok creators and get them to work with us. And one of them pitched the idea of doing a podcast. And so 6 of us said yes. And the group is pretty diverse from a age and region perspective. We've got 2 people in New York, but we've got people in Iowa, Idaho, Colorado, and Georgia. And our ages are from 21 to 57. So we were like, we're having these like really good conversations on WhatsApp, and everyone's like joking and getting along. And so one of the guys was like, let's do a podcast. So we said yes. So last Tuesday we released it, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to frame this. It blew up in the best way possible, like in ways that we never even imagined. We have to date over 41,000 downloads. And to put it in perspective, to be in the top 25% of all podcasts globally, or like at least in the US, you need 120. So we were in the top 1%. We got up to number 29 on the main Apple podcast charts.
Okay, 1 second. Hold on. All right. So let me just remind everybody how experienced I am with doing an amateur podcast, because that's what we're doing, right? Like, we're not backed by like a Vox Media or a Ringer or whatever, like these kind of large podcast networks that have resources, experience, marketing people, producers, like all this stuff. We have some resources because Tim has an agency and he graciously shares those resources with this podcast. That still, I think, makes us an amateur podcast. And we started podcasting here because I was like, Tim, you're a podcaster, you just don't know it yet. And when I said that to you, you kind of were like, really? Do you remember? Like, you were like, I don't know. And I was like, well, I think after doing my own podcast here in Missouri for 4 years, which we broke the government 100 a bunch of times with different episodes on my podcast, which had zero reason. We had just people that we were just like complete sweat equity. But we never, I don't even think we ever got I think a couple times we got in the top Apple, like maybe 200 or something. Like one episode though. So say again where it landed in the Apple podcast charts one more time.
Well, it was 29 on the main chart, and it actually still might be number 1 in the government chart.
Okay. So, before we go any further, so does that mean that Politigood is now your sister wife podcast, and that the Find Out? I don't understand how all that works.
I love all my children equally.
That's the right answer. Thank you for making. No, so I think I have to confess I've had a crazy week. I know I haven't really talked into why, but I'm a caregiver for my husband. He's pretty ill right now, so my time is wildly limited. So I haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast yet. But I know the gist, and I know some of the guys that you're collaborating with. Will you dig a little bit into who those folks are, so people on our channel can kind of learn a little bit about them?
Sure. So really from the most diverse backgrounds that you could possibly imagine. So we have two former Republicans that have now become Democrats. And we have two veterans. And those are not overlaps, by the way. The Republicans are not. One of them is, but the other is very much not. We have a college kid in Iowa who is in his senior year of college. Let's see what else. I mean, we have a Nazi hunter. That's probably the guy who has the most interesting background. Chris Goldsmith. Literally, he's one of the veterans. He was a sergeant in the army and did a tour at least one tour in Iraq. And now he hunts Nazis. He goes and disrupts like Proud Boy events and things like that. So, and then me, like I'm the only one that really has a political background. And these guys have regular, well, Chris's job is not a regular one, but most of them have regular day jobs. And this is kind of like they just started posting content on TikTok, and all of them, I think I'm the smallest one on TikTok by far. I think all of them are over 200,000 followers, and combined, we've got 3 million. So we knew we had tapped into something, and they all have a very different way of talking. So when you listen to this podcast, you get 6 very different perspectives on the same topic. And, we are not diverse in how we look, but like I said, when I say diverse from backgrounds and experiences, definitely. And I think what's been really interesting, we were a little nervous about launching a podcast with 6 white dudes, to be very, very honest. Like, that's not something that our side generally does. But what's been really fascinating is watching people. There's been a couple of the overwhelmingly comments that were positive. There were a couple who were like, why are there no women here? And it was actually women and people of color who were the ones saying, no, we need this because we need more men on the Democratic side. The math doesn't work. So
can I comment on that too? So
yeah.
We got that also when I did the Heartland pod with Sean and Adam, because the 3 of us are white. And my answer, it didn't happen a lot. It's kind of the same kind of thing. My answer was the same, which is I'm giving my own time for free. These 2 people are giving their own time for free. We're advocating for things that absolutely will help people of color, racial minorities, women, people, anybody from a disadvantaged background are people that we're trying to lift up. I am never, ever. Now, if a person of color, we tried to launch a couple of podcasts, for example, from some St. Louis-based TikTokers and stuff. And it's just, as you're discovering, now that you have 2 sister wife podcasts, like, it is a ton of work. It is not a trivial amount of work. It looks like, oh, it's so easy to just click publish. Like, no, it's so much more complicated that you have to promote it. It is like, it's like staying in shape. Like you feel better when you go to the gym once, but like to keep it going, you got to go like a bunch of times a week or it's kind of useless. And I am never, ever going to ask a woman or a person of color to work for no money, ever. That's not something I'm going to do. If they come and they say, look, I really like Politico, I really like what you guys are doing, I'm a whatever, and I would absolutely support their effort to develop their own channel, but I'm not going to ask somebody who's black to work for. Are you crazy? Like, no one can do that. So that's my umbrella speech about the how come you're all white. Well, because I don't know what to tell you. Like, these are the people that the name of the group was White Dudes for Harris, first of all. Like, that's kind of the thing.
Well, I mean, I understand the reality is when it's been just explained to them, there's no issue. It's really not. Totally. It's not even really an issue. I think that's
also. I just wanted to make sure that I got that out there because
I wouldn't do that either. But like, I think that like what we need on the left. I'm kind of having a hard time just saying Democrats because it's really about the left and progressives. We need a variety of voices talking to a variety of communities, and the reality is that men, we're moving away from white men. It's really men. Men are the hardest demographic for Democrats. And part of it is that we don't talk to that community the way, that we do with some of the other communities, because white men in particular, have always had a privileged position. So it makes sense that we would do that. But the reality is that we lost white men big time, 20 points, something like that. We lost Latino men. We we won black men, but it was much closer this time. So we need to talk to them, because with the math just doesn't work otherwise. We cannot move forward. We will not win in 2028 if we do not improve our standing with men. So one of the ways to do that, and what we are trying to do, is create a space where they can hear people who talk and look just like them and say, oh, I see a place on the left or in the Democratic Party, however you want to describe it. And we've already gotten notes from people. Like Chris read one, he might have read it on the second episode, I can't remember, where this person basically said they were a Republican for a long time. They had problems with Donald Trump, but they also they weren't super sold on Kamala or the Democrats. But after listening to our podcast, in which I think it was Zach said, because he was a Republican before moving over, but he said, I knew I had to pick a side because that's really where we are. And this guy said, I went and registered with the Democratic Party, and I agreed that I had to pick a side. So that is just one person of the about 100 million men in this. Well, it's probably more than that, but like, there is impact. It works. It's hard work, but it can be done. So that's sort of the answer to that.
And as a marketer, and so that's one of the things that we'll always talk about, like kind of this intersection of like progressive communication, politics, tech, because Tim and I have realized in the course of our careers that like there's not a lot of people that really, from an experiential perspective, understand campaigns, not politics, campaigns. Actual campaigns, actual candidates and what they have to deal with, technology, distribution systems, the guts of technology, how the web actually functions, and then digital marketing and content marketing. Like those skill sets are not as layered as you kind of think they are. And so I like to think that you and I, Tim, know a fair amount about how hard it is to not just reach people, but in particular reach men right now. Mm-hmm. Men have very sort of conscribed. Women are kind of more like a shotgun. They're kind of like they're all over the place, but it's a bit easier because we just congregate. Women just congregate differently than men do. Period. End of story. That's it. So it's not. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to say it make women sound like it's uncomplicated to market to us, but it's just easier because of the way we digest information. We are a little bit more diversified in our media habits, but we're also stickier. That's one thing that a marketing person will tell you is that women are stickier and we're a little bit more brand loyal, blah, blah, whatever. I'm being very general. But men, one of the reasons that men are very hard to find online is because in most American media cultures, men congregate around sports. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just the congregate on like sports in general. People have this like ESPN idea of sports. They follow their team. So if you're going to try to gather if you're going to try to like figure out a way to communicate, Joe Rogan pulled off something that, Rush Limbaugh did too, which is to kind of just say nonsense and make people that don't know what you're talking about feel smart. Mm-hmm. Because you're not burdened with the truth. And once you're not burdened with the truth, you can say whatever the hell you want. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So what I will say about what you guys are doing, why I'm excited about it, is because like right now, we have to try everything.
Yep.
And so I just want to see things that work. And we absolutely need as many counterweights to Joe Rogan as humanly possible. I know we talked about how he was kicked out of the number one spot by
Midas. Yep.
And that's great. That's great. I'm really excited. That's super. I was thrilled, whatever. But that's, again, like, it's not a given that that's going to stay that way. Joe Rogan is still extremely popular. He is no more loyal to the truth today than he was 2 weeks ago or a month ago or whatever. Right. The guy is an avowed RFK Jr. fan. Loves him. And so if we're going to peel people away from the Gish Gallopers of the world, right? The people that are just so good at just like, carpet bombing the world with bullshit. We need people who sound like them. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we talk like that. I mean, like I had to turn the explicit button on because there's a fair amount of swearing and, guys giving each other shit on air like you do. And and I think that your point about, I think women do a better job of keeping friends longer in their life and building a community. And part of that is because men are basically told to be stoic and strong and shut up and just like project this, strength, and are not encouraged to continue friendships out of your 20s, once people get married.
I would say discouraged.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And and we are seeing the effects of this, like what, a lot of people refer to as the loneliness epidemic, which isn't just about men. It's about older Americans and everybody. But like,
it's not new. I think we're just finally talking about it.
Yeah.
I think this has been a problem for a long time, and we're finally just putting a label on it. Yeah,
it has. But I think also like more work from home has happened since COVID. So you're not even getting that, the water cooler chat or whatever. Like you have your meeting and you're done, and you might talk on Slack, but you don't have any of that community building. And so, and some of the stats for men on suicides are some of the highest, white men in particular, some of the highest in the country. And drug use is a real problem because I think when you don't have a lot of friends and you turn, there's a lot of reasons for that. But we need better spaces for men to gather. And sports is a great one, right? Because that's the obvious, and that's wonderful, and we should always continue to do that. And I love doing that as well. But we need other places too, where people, and also say it's okay to express your feelings, which is something that many men do not get that message growing up. So I think that's part of what we are trying to do too, is show there's a different way to be an adult man in America that does not require you to be what I referred to in the second episode as the 80s action star version of masculinity, right?
Or even not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but you just made me think of something, which is that there's this notion that we're not given nothing gendered in this conversation, aside from the actual attacks on genderism right now, which is fucking ridiculous. But anyway, I don't know why colors are gendered, for example. Why is pink a girl?
Yeah.
It's so dumb. All that's so dumb.
Right.
But, the prescriptions for both genders are broken. And when things break, you can't, sometimes things emerge from brokenness that are immediately better. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. I like to think that during the 90s and the 80s and the 90s, when I became of age, as horrifying as the AIDS epidemic was, what emerged from that was, I call it the post-Angels in America, that we're having these healthier. Now, I would much rather that we had not sacrificed so many lives, but what transpired from it was that there was this visibility of queerness that had never existed before and whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not so straight. I'm not saying that was an easy fight. I don't want to oversimplify that, but that's what everybody was like, oh my God, there's queer people all over the country. There's a great bit about that in Bill Burr's latest special. It's really funny. We have not really changed the prescription for what a woman needs to focus on, what a man needs to focus on. The problems that women face are oppressive in nature, period. If we solve some of those problems, life will get better for women immediately. If you say if we normalize executive female leadership, if we don't get so obsessed about, if pay increases, if there are no challenges to reproductive rights, things like that. I don't know if the NIH had just cut funding to research that was studying how women are murdered when they are in their first trimester. Maybe their lives would get better. For men, I think that we have not ever changed the prescription for what it's supposed to be. And the truth is that what you just said, this is what made me think of it, and I'm sorry for the long preamble. I remember watching a movie with Bruce Willis that Steven Spielberg directed, and I'm going to forget the name of it, but it's the one where he goes back and relives his childhood self comes to visit him. And it was from it's probably 20 years old now, more than that even. Maybe it's from it's post Sixth Sense. And there's a scene at the end where Bruce Willis has fixed himself, and he was before a selfish. That's one of those a yuppie turns into a good guy stories because he's visited by the ghost of Christmas past or whatever in the form of his young childhood body. And this kid lectures him until suddenly, at the end, Bruce Willis is getting spoilers, whatever. Who cares? It's not that good. Don't watch it. And he's getting on to. He sees himself into the future. His present self sees himself in the future, and in that instance, he is a family man. And I thought to myself, what if that's not what you want, though? Like what? Or what if it's what you feel like you're not ready for in your life?
Right.
Or what if you feel like I'm not someone who's going to attract that kind of partner? I'm having a trouble. Like, we have to have better images of what manhood can be. And I think that is one area where we have, and I think that's why that there's this backlash against women, is because women have discovered that we can be other things. And it's normalized, right? It's normalized that, like, you can have a group of girlfriends well into your 30s and 40s. Thank you, Sex and the City and whatever, like, there's, go on the internet right now. One of the most popular podcasts in America is by a woman talking to celebrities, but also talking about, like, what it means to be a professional. There's still not an alter. We said this in the very first podcast when we brought some of the white dudes from Harris on, right? We talked about this. There's still not enough support for, as much as I resent the obvious oppression against women, there's still not a good alternative for what it means to mature as a man, right?
Right.
And the availability of spaces for someone to drift into and go, I don't like what these people over here are saying, but I can't find another space because, like, every time I go to check my fantasy football or whatever, there's some MAGA asshole in there, and that's what you know what I mean? Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, and that's part of what we're trying to do with Find Out, is just to show that there are men out there that don't prescribe to that really, like, bullshit narrative of, like, I need to, be the big man and, bring home all the money and, and basically be a little bit emotionally vacant with the family. And that, why is kindness not part of what masculinity is, or empathy,
or the expression of
joy,
grief,
or grief, like all of those
men
things.
Men are allowed this is against Bill Burr. Men are allowed two feelings, joy and anger.
Yeah.
That's not, there's a spectrum of things. Like, my father apologized to me for crying at his dad's funeral. I was like, if you can't cry at your dad's funeral, when are you supposed to grieve, dude? Like that's a great time to cry when you lost someone, is at the actual funeral. It's like the best time to do it. Like, of all the times, everybody's going to be like, oh, she's crying because her mom died. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, how many times have you heard the expression, like, oh, they're so brave, they held it together? It's like, why is holding it together, which basically means suppressing your emotions, right?
Right.
Why is that the marker for being brave?
Right.
I would argue that, like, expressing your grief is really the brave way to do it, not shoving it down into a box until it explodes years later.
Right. And, like, we're not talking about, like, crocodile tears, like every time that Elon Musk, like, loses $1 billion, he cries or whatever. Shut up.
Oh.
Whatever. I'm talking, and there are times, like, like, I'm not, I just said dry-eyed, like, my husband's very ill, and, like, I didn't break down, and I might sometime, and it will be okay if I do.
Yep.
But, like, this is a hold it together moment. I get myself in a headspace where I can sound rational and coherent, and I do that with clients too, and I do it with other people in other professional situations. But, like, I don't feel like I have to all the time if I don't want to, and the people still say to me, oh, it's okay. I'm like, I know, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me 50 plus years to get that level of confidence, but I want everyone, I don't care what your chromosomes say, I want you to enter adulthood knowing that when there is something insurmountable that you are facing, it is okay to say, I don't know what to do.
Yep.
It's okay to say, I need somebody to help me. It's okay to say, I don't know where to go to find help.
Right.
But to throw it back to talking about Find Out, I think the only place to start is to say everything broke, right? And we are dealing with a shattered notion of what it means to be all of the things that we're talking about. And the only way I think that we can start to even reconsider rebuilding is to look past the politics of the moment and think about community. And we are more digital. You and I don't live in the same place.
Yep.
We talk all the time, but we don't live in the same place. So as much as the internet is a form of alienation, I think it also can be a form of community building. But in order to do that successfully, you need to empower people. And I think the Find Out dudes that you're working with are a really good example of this, of who understand that nuance, who understand like we're more than just like we're a place for people to meet other people who they can talk to and say like, look, everybody has to make a binary choice every 4 years. There are 0 people, I promise you, who are 100%, except for Trumpers suddenly, who are 100% thrilled when they go to the ballot box and fill in the bubble. Like no one is like, oh, thank goodness. I have no reservations about this vote at all. This is, I'm all in. Like that never happens. But there's a certain segment of society that has not gotten that memo because they haven't had to give a shit until now. Right. And Donald Trump is such a monster. He's such a Clydesdale, just stomping across everything, that there is now a section of America that realizes that they too can be victimized. And I'm not going to make the leopards eating my face joke. I'm a little bit tired of that, honestly. Like some people, sure, but not everybody. And now that this cohort of young men have realized that, like, yeah, your rights are also up for grabs, bro, for sure. Absolutely. We can't just do nothing. We can't just... So talk about where they can find the Find Out podcast. Talk about what you have in store. Are you excited? Like, are you just like blown away?
I mean, it's funny because I was in Austin with some friends, proof that I go to red states, by the way, this last week when it was sort of blowing up. And I was the one that had access to the metrics. So I was sort of like, I had this moment where I was looking at it and I was kind of like, I hit refresh because I was like, that must be a glitch. That
was this after some cocktails that made the whole thing that was more surreal?
Actually, I think it was before. But it was crazy. And then I didn't even tell this story on the second episode of Find Out, but I was at a bar in Austin watching March Madness, and someone next to me just mentioned one of my co-hosts' names, not to me, just it to like somebody else, and I literally. And this bar was empty because it was like early. It was one of the afternoon games, whatever, during the week. And I just like looked at her and I was like, that's my co-host. And that was to me like the moment where I went, okay. Like people, like the fact that like people are having random conversations in random and this person, by the way, is like told me her parents are MAGA in Arizona and she loves this content. She actually didn't know about Find Out, but then obviously got a new subscriber out of that because she was all about that person. And when I showed her the screenshot of the two of us talking, kind of blew her away. But you know, like I am shocked, and it is super fun, and it is fun to do a project that gets that much attention, but more importantly, in an area that is so desperately needed. And, you know, like we've said, like we have a lot of work to do with every community. This isn't just men, but like the reality is we have a lot more, we have a longer way to go with men than the other groups. Like the other groups, you know, I think right candidate, right time, no inflation.
Mobilization too.
It's easier, but like, yeah. But so, and that's part of the thing that we're excited about too, is like, you know, we're not in this podcast to just like bash these people. I mean, some of them, right? Like, well, the far right ones who are never coming back, we'll say some stuff about them.
Yeah,
but like,
you can talk all the shit you want about Mark Rubio. Yeah. Who gives that guy? Fuck that guy.
I don't. No. The administration. No. None of those people, because they're all complicit in this. But right. I mean, like the guy who doesn't pay attention and, you know, gets his news on Facebook or whatever, and like is working 2 jobs and is angry, right? Just angry at the situation. Like we want him to be able to listen to this and say there is a different way, and that not all Democrats are, or not really any Democrats are, these, you know, murderous like villains that we are portrayed about on Fox and their whole podcast network. So that's like, you know, if we're able to get, you know, we were beating Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson last week. Right. You know, that's where I think I was excited, because like if they're looking for that stuff and we're showing up in the same searches, it gives us a shot.
Sure.
And I think that's the exciting thing.
and I'll say I'll say this and then I'll throw it back to you and we'll close up, but we'll wrap up. But I, because of, I live in, so one of the reasons that I thought it was so important that Tim and I did this podcast is because like I do not live on a coast. I used to, but I'm from St. Louis and I live in Missouri, and I've written about this in our newsletter, by the way, politigoodpod.com. Sign up for our digested newsletter. It's a pun once you see it. I'm very clever, very proud of myself. And we're doing more writing in there, which I'm really excited about. And I've mentioned I've mentioned issues like this before, that we need sort of a diversity of thought and diversity of perspectives, and I talk about that a lot in the newsletter. Whatever. So when I still did the Heartland Pod, I had a guy over here working on the building that I manage for our condo association. I'm one of the board members that gets repairs done and stuff. And he's a welder, union welder, ex-union welder. He's in his probably early 70s. Sweetheart, just such a nice guy. And he said to me something about, what's all this about men playing women's sports? And I was like, oh, buddy, that's not, I was like, it's not, don't worry about it. It was just during the Olympics maybe. And I was like, you don't have to worry about that. Don't, honestly, dude, of all the things that you should be worried about, just let that go. I was like, it's just a cudgel. Don't. And then he started unloading to me, and it felt like grief. He's like, but what do I read and what do I do and who do I follow? And I was like, I have a podcast. Subscribe to the Kansas City Star and St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Just follow regularly. And then we started talking about how teachers are grooming children to become trans and that there are litter boxes in classrooms. I mean, like, these are things that the Missouri GOP says all the time. So this is where I'll throw it back to you. When you run into somebody like that in the wild, it's very important that you have somewhere to send them to say, okay, do me a favor. I want you to maybe just log off Facebook for a month. Just stop, because it's feeding you this stuff because it knows you want it, because it knows you click on things and that's how you teach it.
Yep.
Because you say algorithm and they're like, what is that? And they don't understand. These are people that don't know how PDFs work, you guys. Right? Seriously. Yep. So let's talk about that. Like, let's talk about this as an alternative where if you're talking to somebody who falls into the that I gave you guys persona research. I'm a marketer. I love personas. Tim knows this. And so talk about, like, what would you recommend someone say to a person like that about the Find Out podcast? Where can people find it? Where's the best place? What are the best links to send them, etc.? Mm-hmm.
So our main site right now is Substack. So it's findoutpodcast.substack.com. We're also on all the platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of those. What I would say to people is that this is a different type of conversation than you are used to hearing on the right or the left. There isn't really anything out there that sort of speaks to what it's like to be a man in America like this one, because we have such a range of people, ages and backgrounds and regions, right? Like two of us are coastal, the other four are not. And give us a shot. Just listen, just hear how we talk. It is politics driven, but we talk about other stuff too. And it's entertaining. And I think that was part of the reason that I think we did so well, is that people really enjoyed it and it felt lighter than a lot of the content because a lot of doom and gloom, because there's a lot of doom and gloom going on right now. But like, we're trying to like have a bit of a humor is obviously a big way to deal with bad situations, right? And so we're trying to do that. And I think in the second episode, we even did better than the first on that. And yeah, I think just give us a shot at Find Out Podcast, not Find Out, because I found that's somebody else. Findoutpodcast.substack.com, and also toss us a rating on iTunes, because that's how we get our chart rankings.
Yes, absolutely. And also, if you like what we're doing, so really quick for the folks who are listening, if you like what we do, we're not going anywhere. There's still this podcast is doing just fine. It's not like it's not the runaway Taylor Swift compared to the college band that we are, but but I think there's always going to be a place to have nuanced conversations with effective organizers and journalists. We might be a little bit more eat your vegetables than the Find Out pod. We'll see. And I look forward to the moment when we can have some of our folks over from there over here. I'd love to go over there and talk to those guys about the reality of being a woman in a MAGA state. Because holy shit. It is bad, you guys. Man, but I think, like, if you can include humor, if you can make people laugh, you're giving them a sense of relief while you're also the information comes in more readily when it opens the mind in a way laughter does. And so if you can combine truth, honesty, and joy at the same time, that is the sweet sauce. And I think we can do it. We can beat the Rogans. We can beat them back, Tim.
Yep.
All right, man. So good to see you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for this. I appreciate you. Oh, and I can say, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts also.
Yes, please do. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Today's episode was produced by Rachel Parker and Tim Fullerton. Audio, music, and engineering by Chris Lombardo. Our assistant producer is Lizette Nolasco. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts and watch entire episodes on our YouTube channel. Sign up for premium content and more at politigoodpod.com or email us at hello@politigoodpod.com.